Let's share our presentation again. So here, tag 2, okay. Let's see together. What are the new models for lesson planning? Here are different lesson planning models. Number 1, PPP. It's the abbreviation of presentation, practice, production. So again, what does PPP stand for? What does it stand for? Let's read together. Presentation, practice,
production.
Yeah, what about TBL? Let's see together. Task-based learning. What does TBL stand for? Yes, task-based learning. What do we mean by task-based learning? It depends on what. When we say task-based learning, is doing tasks. So, is it a teacher-centered or a learner-centered approach? It depends on tasks, doing tasks. Is it a teacher-centered or a learner-centered one?
Learner-centered.
Of course, it's a learner-centered one. What about TTT? What about TTT? What does it stand for? TTT.
Test, teach, test.
Excellent. Test. Let's see together. Test, teach, test. So it all depends on assessment. It depends on assessment. What about TPR? It's very famous in approaches. TPR. What does TPR stand for?
Total physical response.
Yeah, total physical response. So it depends all the time on doing some actions and practicing the language, yes, by movement. That's right. Yeah, total physical response. What about LA? What about LA?
Lexical approach.
Yeah, lexical approach. And what do we mean by lexical? Does it depend on giving a whole grammar rule or dividing the rule into parts or into chunks? So lexical, is it giving a whole summary or a whole thing all the time, or dividing it into small parts? When we say lexical, it means to divide things into chunks or into small parts, okay? So again, PPP stands for presentation, practice, production. Who starts the task here in PPP? Is he the student or the teacher? PPP, presentation, practice, production. Who starts presentation? Yes, the teacher. Practice. Is it only for the teacher or both? Yeah. What about production? Production from home, from the teacher or the student? Production.
From the students. From the
students. Of course, the students or the learners. What about task TBL? TBL stands for task-based learning. So it's is it a teacher-centered or a learner-centered?
Learner-centered.
Yes, a learner-centered. What about TTT? TTT stands for test, teach, test. Who's testing the students or the learners? Who's giving tests? Of course,
the teacher.
The teacher. What about TPR? Yes, total physical response. Who is doing the task in TPR? TPR, total physical response. Who is doing the task here?
The students.
The students, of course. So is it a teacher-centered or a learner-centered approach? Total physical response. Of
a learner-centered approach.
A learner-centered, of course. What about LA? Lexical approach. It depends on dividing the task into pieces or in small parts. What about GD? Guided discovery. So what is the role of the teacher in the last approach, the guided discovery? What is the role of the teacher here? Is he a traditional teacher or a facilitator in this guided discovery approach? From its name, guided, yeah, of course, the role of the teacher is here a facilitator. Let's start with the first one, the PPP model. And we've told before, PPP stands for presentation, practice, production, okay? Let's see together. Here are some the steps of the model: presentation, practice, production. Okay, we're going to match the sentences to each stage of this. Okay, look at the first part, which is stage, which is presentation. What do we do here in the presentation? Here we have A, B, C, D. Okay, we have some steps. Which one goes with the presentation? We have free independent practice, controlled guided practice, students practice the target language, teacher highlights meaning, form, and pronunciation, learners to try to personalize the language. Let's match them together. What do? We do in the presentation?
Warming up.
Yes, number one, the warm-up. Second, actual presentation. What did the teacher tell the students? And the C, checking understanding. What about practice? What about practice? We have, yeah, how many steps are there in practice? Yes, control the guided practice. What do we mean by control the guided practice?
Multiple choice
What do you mean by
questions, fill exercises, matching exercises.
Yeah, that's great. Writing, giving some exercises or writing some exercises. But of course, does the teacher start giving examples, or he elicits the examples from the students? Which one is more, or which one is better, to give everything, or the teacher does the whole task, or to try to elicit the examples from the students?
Of course, to elicit examples from students.
Yeah, of course. So here in control the guided practice, the teacher is the leader here, but he tries to, of course, to elicit the examples from the students themselves. So here in PPP, we have three stages from the name itself: presentation, practice, production. In each stage of them, we have some steps. For example, in the presentation, we have the warm-up, okay, the actual presentation from the teacher, checking understanding, of course. How did the teacher check understanding? How does the teacher check understanding, or he makes sure that students understand? How did the teacher check understanding?
Asking concept checking questions.
Yeah, maybe asking questions, maybe asking them to give models, maybe by drilling, maybe by showing some flashcards, and asking the children or the learners to react or interact to them and try to form sentences and so on. D, teacher highlights meaning, form, and pronunciation, of course, after eliciting from the students. And the second stage is practice. We have two steps here: control the guided practice, and students practice the target language with controlled activities, focusing, of course, on accuracy. And the last step, which is production, free independent practice. Here, the students try to think of as much examples as they can about themselves or their friends. And of course, learners try to personalize the language and use it in a less controlled activity, focusing on fluency. So, is it important in the production stage to focus on accuracy or fluency here? Which is more important? Yeah, of course. So, are we after grammar, or are we after checking each single mistake, or we are trying to encourage students to speak freely in this stage?
Of course, engaging students in this stage.
Yeah, of course. Try to involve and engage all the students to speak freely without any interruption from the teacher, of course, and they try to encourage them to speak freely without correcting their errors or their mistakes, okay? Let's move to the second one. Here, we're going all, okay. So, from your point of view, do we all apply this approach with our learners or not? The PPP approach. Do we apply it or not? Presentation, practice, production. Do we apply this model with our learners in planning our lessons?
Yes.
Of course, yes, okay. Okay, from your point of view, does it have some advantages?
Of course, it has some advantages because you give students more practice and giving them controlled exercises, and let them the idea to speak, and give them free practice activity to speak and to have fluency. And this is very important, the practice.
Yeah, sure. Do you agree with Mr. Ahmed? Do you agree with him? So,
yes. I think Ms. Firdaus.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I have arrived since 8 o'clock. So I wanted to share you, Ms. Firdaus. I think the most important topic here is checking understanding, number C. I think because it's important to give some feedback to my students about their mistakes or their understanding. I think so.
Okay, so yes, okay, that's okay, I agree with you. Okay, so what about the disadvantages? So here we have some advantages. The teacher tries to guide the students. He tries to encourage them to speak fluently, but here is still we have a point. Is it a teacher-centered or a learner-centered approach? Presentation, practice, production.
Ms. Ferdous, I think the teacher here is not important for him to focus on accuracy for the learners, because the learners learners can make some mistakes.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So let's check our understanding and see the pros and cons of this approach. Okay. So here, PPP is usually a deductive approach because the teacher is starting the task and he's doing the task. And of course, it depends on lower levels. Here, the teacher presents the target language and then gives the learners opportunity to practice it. It's a good point to let the students or the learners practice, okay, but the teacher does the whole task. PPP works better at lower levels. So it needs a little bit of a change if the teacher tries to ask the students or elicit the examples from the students first before the presentation, and after that gives them feedback. So it works better at lower levels, but it becomes a bit problematic with more advanced learners whose abilities may be much less uniform and who need to compare and contrast several grammatical items at the same time. Also, in the presentation stage, the teacher can present the new language creatively, such as a realia, flashcards, or a short story, for example. But in the second stage, learners have an opportunity for controlled practice. During this stage of the lesson, it's important to correct phonological and grammatical mistakes. So here, the disadvantage or the problem is that the teacher takes a lot of time in this control the practice part to correct the mistakes. So it wastes to a little bit some time, okay? Common activities which can be used for the control the practice stage include gap-filled exercises, substitution drills, sentence transformation, split sentences, picture dictations, class questionnaires, recording, and so on. The final stage is the production stage, the opportunities for freer practice. Unfortunately, the teacher often runs out of time, and this is the stage that gets cut out. So when the teacher comes to the last stage, which is the most important one, when the learners have to practice the language, here or time is running out. So the teacher cannot involve all the learners and the students to practice the language, even though it's crucial for developing learners' confidence, of course, and competence. Again, there are numerous activities for this stage, and what you choose will depend on the language, okay, you're teaching and on the level of your learners. So the problem here is that the teacher consumes a lot of time presenting the language, correcting the mistakes in the controlled practice and in the free practice. And when it comes to practice the language from the learners, it takes only a short time. The teacher can only ask a few number of students, and of course, the rest of the students are not able to share or practice. And the last point in the production stage, it's important to monitor and make a note of any errors so that you can build in class feedback and error analysis at the end of the lesson. So, of course, it has some advantages, but the problem is that the teacher doesn't have enough time to give feedback or to involve all the students in this model, because he's doing or he's taking much of the time. Although he's trying to encourage the students, tries to correct their mistakes, he tries to let them speak freely and of course fluently, but still he consumes a lot of time, okay? So here, pros and cons of the PPT. Let's see the benefits. Okay, let's mention the benefits. Okay. The benefits here, it's an easy approach for new teachers to grasp. All of us as teachers plan our lessons like this: presentation, practice, and production. So it's an easy approach, okay? The disadvantages: language structures tend to be isolated and unnatural. All the time, when we plan our lessons, we write key structures or grammar. So it is not taught, the grammar is not taught in a context related to the vocabulary. We can teach the vocabulary isolated here in this approach, and the grammar isolated in different examples, okay? So this is one of the disadvantages or drawbacks. Also, teacher-led, not learner-centered. So it depends more on the teacher. Learners know what to expect. The teacher is giving them a lesson about, today we're going to know about kaza or kada. So the learners know what to expect. They can expect what is the teacher going to tell them. Okay. Some learners may find it predictable and boring. I know every day the teacher is going to start by presenting the new vocabulary, after that the new grammar, after that giving some examples, and after that asking us to tell him some examples. So it's boring. We can expect what is going to happen. So the students may become passive, okay? Also, teachers feel confident that they've taught the material. Here, the teacher feels that, okay, I can do the task and it's over, okay? So PPP is more suitable for lower level learners. The benefits for the teacher are that it is an easy approach, okay? So now let's move to the second one. What is the title, or what does TBL stand for? It's task-based learning. And as any approach, we have some stages. What do you expect are the stages of this approach? Task-based learning. What do we have to do if we are asking our learners to do a task? What do we have to do? Can you tell me, or can you expect? What shall a teacher do before telling his learners to do a task?
First of all, Mr. Firdaus, I divide the class into groups, and then each group, then I explain what are the rules of the task.
Yeah, okay.
I think these are two major rules when I put an exercise for my learners.
Okay, but when you are asking them to do a task, what's your focus? Is it on doing? Is it on answering some exercises, or doing a task by themselves, or doing something? In this approach, task-based learning.
First of all, I explain what is the aim of the purpose of the exercise.
Great. So that's really great. So what are the stages? When if you are at home, you have a lesson. This lesson depends on task. What are the stages you are going to tell your students about? Are you going to tell them about the task directly, or there is something to tell them before the task? Before doing the task?
I think I don't tell them directly about this exercise is about past.
That's great. So because
it depends on the previous lesson.
Excellent. That's right. So we have, what is the first stage of TBL? What is the first stage? The pre-stage. And what do we do in the pre-stage? Who can tell us what are the stages of TBL? Do you remember? What are the stages? Yes, pre-task.
We faced this in the performance task with fourth grade.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, it was TBL, I guess, because first the teacher had to explain what's going to happen and show models and so on, like that, and brainstorm ideas, right?
Yeah, that's right. So how many stages? Again, the question is, how many stages are there? We have 3 stages. What is the first stage? If you want to do حلة محشي، لو احنا عايزين نعمل حلة محشي قبلها المفروض بنعمل ايه؟ preparing ourselves or our students for doing the task. So here, let's see together, what are the stages? We have the pre-task stage, we have the task cycle, presenting the task itself, and of course, the language focus. This is what I want you to tell me about. So what are the stages of TBL? Let's memorize them together. What are they? Pre-task, task cycle, and language focus. What do we do in the pre-task? What do we do in the pre-task? And of course, pre means before doing the task. What do you mean by pre-task? What do you do in the pre-task? Okay, let's see together. What do we do? Introduction to the topic and task. Here it's very important to tell them about what are they going to do, the name of the task itself or the title. And the task cycle, we have task, the task itself, planning for the task, doing it, okay, and of course at the end report to tell us or to tell the teacher what have they done, okay. And here the last stage is language focus, analysis, and the practice to the language. So again, what are the stages of TBL? What are the stages of TBL? Let's read together. Yeah, pre-task,
cycle, language focus.
Yeah, and of course, language focus. Okay, so what do we do in the pre-task? Introduction to topic and task. And here we try to give our students or our learners some simple, clear instructions about how the task is going to work, okay? And in the task cycle here, we are telling them about the steps of doing the tasks, and we try to brainstorm our learners' ideas about how they will do the task. So here we have some brainstorming and some discussion before doing the task. And after that, we encourage our learners to do the task and things either in pairs or in groups. And after they finish, we try to collect information from each group about what they have done, okay? And of course, to give them feedback. And of course, at the last stage is the language focus, analysis, and the practice. Each group tries to exchange the ideas together and they try to analyze and practice the language, okay? To be more clear, let's see this. A task-based learning story lesson. Here, pre-task, task cycle, we have task, planning report, language focus, and feedback. Here, we are going to match each point to its suitable stage, okay? So let's see together. In the pre-task, we have an activity talking about the story. In the task cycle, in the task stage or step, learners prepare a story from their own or about themselves. In the planning, learners identify what happened and the roles of the characters. And the report part, spokesman presents their story. So this is an example of a task-based learning story. And language focus and feedback, here teacher provides any relevant feedback and focuses on language. So do you think, is it a teacher-centered approach or a learner-centered approach? A task-based learning. What do you think about it? Is it a teacher-centered or a learner-centered approach? Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay, say hello, please. To feel relaxed. Yes, okay, hellos. Okay, so is it a teacher-centered or a learner-centered approach?
Learner.
Of course, it's a learner-centered because the teacher here is a guide and a facilitator. He tells them about the steps and he tries to encourage them all the time, okay? So here is a shape about it to summarize it. The pre-task is an introduction to topic and task. Teacher explores topic with the class, helps learners to understand the instructions and prepare. And here are the other stages. The second stage, task, which we call it task cycle. We have first the task itself. Here, learners do the task in pairs or small groups while the teacher monitors, and this is very important. The second step is planning. Learners here, if you notice, learners. So all the task is done by the learners. The teacher is only a monitor. Here, learners prepare to report to the whole class, oral or written. And this is very important to be very specific from the first hint or the first side. Oral or written, how they did the task and or what they decide or discovered. And the last step, which is report, some groups presented their reports to the class or exchange, and this is very important, which we call peer learning, to learn from each others and to try to correct their mistakes, peer correction, okay? Written reports and compare results together. And the last stage, of course, is the language focus. Also, if you can see, learners analysis, learners examine and discuss specific features. They try to help their peers and correct their mistakes, and also give reflection and feedback. And the practice here, this is the role of the teacher. The teacher conducts practice of new words, phrases, and patterns that occur in the data. So how much percent does the teacher work here? How much percent does the teacher work? Only at the beginning when he gives the instructions, at the end when he gives feedback. And how much percentage do learners work here in this approach? Can you guess?
99%.
Yeah, okay. So we can say maybe 80% for learners and 20% from the teacher to be fair. Okay. To break the ice, let's watch a video about these models. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this and watch a video about these approaches, and after that come back and have some comments. So are you ready to watch a video?
Okay.
I feel that you're tired. Okay, so
we sent these videos on the WhatsApp to watch after that.
Sure, Mr. Ahmed, I'll send everything بإذن الله, the recording and everything, inshallah, videos and everything. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this. Come out to Zoom. Sorry. And share a video with you. Okay. Are you ready for a video?
Yes.
Tell me yes, please.
Yes,
Okay.
we are ready.
I like to hear this. Yes, please. Okay. So here are, yes. The sound?
Instructional methodology used in the design of ABC time curriculum and online classes. In this training series, which focuses on methodology, teachers learn about instructional methods for helping English learners develop language skills. This is the second video in the series on methodologies. Here we will examine 3, PPP, ESA, and TBL. This video series provides teachers with just a brief overview of each method and examples of how the method is demonstrated in the design of classes, as well as examples of how teachers can apply instructional strategies that support the methodologies. In this second video in the series, we will discuss PPP. This stands for Present, Practice, and Produce. We will also discuss ESA, which stands for Engage, Study, and Activate, and TBL, Task-Based Learning, which, as suggested in the name, means students learn language as they complete smaller or larger tasks. The first video in this series examined CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning, and the next video in the series will examine other areas. But first, let's look at PPP. One way to understand the value of PPP, Present, Practice, and Produce, is to see it as a way of ordering instruction. First, the teacher presents vocabulary, sentence structures, or information about topics. Next, the students are given opportunities to engage in guided practice. And third, students engage in activities that allow them to use and produce language and new knowledge. Here's an example of an ABC time lesson for teachers to use to present, help students practice, and provide students with opportunities to produce the language. During presentation, the teacher may introduce vocabulary or sentence structures, as happens in this lesson here. During practice, the students engage in activities that enable them to become more familiar with the new language The activities may ask them to listen to the instructor say the word or phrase, and then the students identify a picture or match pictures and words, as shown in this practice activity. During production, students produce something. They demonstrate listening, speaking, writing, and reading skills they have obtained after learning and practicing the language. Production may include a variety of activities, such as engaging in conversations with the teacher or other students, creating something like listing ideas either verbally or in writing, or as shown here, engaging in a role-playing activity. What can teachers do to enhance the value of the present, practice, and produce system of instruction? One resource discussing PPP shows it as a triangle to emphasize change from the teacher speaking the most during presentation, as indicated in the upper part of the triangle, to the teacher offering guidance during practice, but also providing plenty of opportunity for students to engage in speaking, as shown in the middle part of the triangle, to then the students doing most of the talking to produce the language, with the teacher only speaking when necessary, as depicted in the lower part of the triangle. This emphasizes one of the goals of PPP, to reduce teacher talk time and increase student talk time. One way to reduce teacher talk time and avoid unnecessary language when giving directions, for example, is to simply demonstrate how to do it. The teacher can reduce and simplify language used while demonstrating how to do something. For example, with this lesson, the teacher could say, "Find the words, watch TV, click and move the words to the picture." As the teacher is saying this, the teacher can perform the action of moving the words to the pictures to show the students what to do. If there are several steps to an activity, it is often best to break up the instructions into separate steps. The teacher can demonstrate a step, stating it out loud in simple language, ask students to perform the step, and then demonstrate the next step and ask students to perform it. Once students understand all the steps, they can continue with the activity, completing all steps on their own.
So, how can the teacher modify the PPP model to make it more learner-centered one? You can look at the screen, by the way, and read. How can the teacher turn it to be more effective to the learner and to be more learner-centered rather than teacher-centered?
Make the TTT minimum to a minimum level, number one.
Yeah, that's great. So the first point is to minimize the TTT, the teacher talking time, to talk less and let the learners, talk more.
Student talking time, yes. Encourage
of
student talking
course.
time.
Yeah, so the second point is to promote student talking time, is TTT, student talking time. So let the students, of course, to let the students or learners talk more than the teacher, trying to say examples, trying to practice the language. So the time here is for the learners to practice more. Number 3,
giving instructions and make steps in giving instructions to students. Encourage them independence during the production.
That's
to be independent students.
Yeah, that's really right. So although the PPP has some cons, we can change it to be more effective. We can turn it from a teacher-centered approach and make it more effective and turning it to a more learner-centered approach. If the teacher minimizes the TTT, the teacher talking time, and increases the STTT, student talking time. Also, if the teacher demonstrates how to do something, he encourages the learners to practice more, to elicit some examples, to give them more time. Of course, to reduce and simplify the language, not to use a complicated language, of course. Break instructions into steps instead of giving a long presentation. He can break it into small parts or chunks to let the students talk as much as they can or as much as possible. Also to encourage, of course, independence during production, to let the students from the first minute from the lesson to the last minute of the lesson, students to talk freely, to talk independently without an interruption or correcting their mistakes, and to change the focus from accuracy to fluency, to give it more time to the students. Okay, so is it clear till now how to change it from as a teacher-centered approach to a learner-centered one? Is it clear till now? Okay, so let's move to the other approaches.
These are some ways teachers can support the PPP model. Next, we will consider ESA, Engage, Study, and Activate. ESA is similar to PPP in many ways. It is a way of ordering instruction or showing the way instruction will be handled. First, the goal is to engage the students, get them interested. Next, students need to study the topic, learn it, and practice it. And third, the students activate their learning by continuing to practice.
By the way, ESA is an alternative name for guided, the last one, guided discovery, GD, guided discovery, okay? ESA, Engage, Study, and Activate is another name for guided discovery, okay, my dear friends, okay?
And engage in activities that help them to use and remember the language. Do you see overlapping patterns with PPP? Notice how some presenting may occur during warm-up in the engage phase, and presentation or presenting also occurs during the study phase as the teacher introduces the new language to the students. Practice occurs during the study phase as well, so students can build their skills and abilities, but practice activities also help students to activate learning. Students continue to activate their new knowledge and skills during the produce stage of PPP. Although the two methodologies, PPP and ESA, overlap instructional phases, the underlying emphasis of ESA is to promote student interest and engagement in all phases. ABC Time curriculum promotes this by providing activities that are designed to be interesting and help students stay focused on learning. Warm-up activities, which may include watching and discussing a video that introduces a topic, or listening to an audio file, discussing an interesting picture, or engaging in some kind of introductory activity, like this one for more advanced students. The complete lesson for this warm-up teaches a science topic on being clean and healthy. Before introducing new vocabulary like bacteria and germs, the teacher does a warm-up activity, like this one, and students are asked to match pictures of dirty things or people to the word dirty, and pictures of clean things or people to the word clean. To engage students further, the teacher can ask questions to get students' opinions, like, do you like being dirty? Or when you get dirty, what do you do to clean up? Teachers can promote the underlying principles of the ESA model by considering ways to keep students' attention and interest. For example, teachers can give students trophies throughout the class to reward good work and effort. At the end of class, teachers can promote students' good work and effort by displaying students' screens on podiums to show how well students did and to assign medals for good participation, speaking, listening, and other performance. Throughout the class, teachers should plan lesson activities to help students stay engaged. For example, while one student is doing something on the class page or the board, other students may be asked to write on paper or perform actions, so all students have something to do while the one completes something on the class page. Students' interest and motivation is also affected by correction methods. It is important to consider ways to correct students in a way that encourages them to keep trying. And one way to do this is to simply repeat something that has been said incorrectly. Let the student hear it again and then move on. Finally, while trophies can be used to reward students for correct answers, they can also be used to award students for effort. Awarding students for effort helps them to realize they will not be penalized if they say or do something incorrectly, and often knowing that encourages them to continue participating without risk. Frequent praise is one of the best ways to keep students motivated. Another common instructional method used in language learning classrooms is TBL, or task-based learning. In essence, TBL teachers give students a task, which students must complete using whatever English they happen to know that will help them complete the task. TBL processes can occur in many ways.